Welcome to Between the Highs, Life Behind the Logo. This isn't a podcast about overnight success. It's about the long road that came before it. Here we sit down with small business owners from our community and talk about the parts of life you don't see on social media. The childhoods, the setbacks, the detours, the seasons that shaped who they became long before they ever built a brand. We start at the beginning, where they grew up, what home felt like, who they were in school, and what their 20s really looked like when no one had it figured out. We talk about the hardships that changed them, the lessons that stayed, the things they wish they could go back and tell their younger selves. We talk about business, how they started, what they struggled through, and what success actually costs when you're building something of your own. Because most of life doesn't happen at the peaks. It happens in between. That's where the real stories live, between the highs. Life before the logo. Hey, I'm Mack Ridgeway with Ridgeway Roofing. Today on Between the Highs, Life Before the Logo, I have John Reynolds, founder of RPI Roofing. John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Mac. We got a little history together, so
We do.
It's pretty exciting watching your story too. Fifth generation Savannah, grandparents, great grandparents, both sides of the family all lived here, whatever. Went to Savannah Christian elementary school. Parents divorced, mother remarried, moved to Augusta, Georgia. Went to high school up in Augusta, Georgia, so that's a great place to be from.
Yeah.
When the Masters coming up every year. And ended up at Georgia Southern College. And at the time, it was before it was university. Went to Georgia Southern, frat brat, really where my leadership was kind of the beginning of my leadership. I went through all the chairs of the fraternity and all that kind of stuff, and met my wife, Marcy. We have three fine young men, Matthew, Samuel, and Foster. Foster's kind of in this roofing business now, in the sheet metal fabrication. We, you graduate from college, you don't know what you're going to do. All of a sudden, life hits you square in the face, and I wasn't real sure what I wanted to do. And back then, when I got out of school, you went to Atlanta, you grabbed the classifieds, and you started reading the classifieds. And so I had an opportunity to either work for Time Life magazine, being a magazine guy that manages the grocery stores and the shelf space, or Stanley Hardware. And I took a job with Stanley Hardware that required me to drive a Stanley step van from New Britain, Connecticut to Los Angeles. And for 1 year, I went and called on places like Plantation Building Supply in California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. I put 125,000 miles on a truck in 1 year. And so I came off the road, landed in North Carolina with a territory, realized that success there meant moving back to New Britain, Connecticut, the armpit capital of the world. And that wasn't for me. And then I kind of bounced a few times. I got into industrial sales. I ended up in pharmaceuticals thinking, yeah, man, pharmaceutical reps, that's the way to go. And I did that for 3 or 4 years and was miserable. My wife had a good job, quit my job without another job. I would not recommend that. And kind of started soul searching, and I met Alan Lancaster with Metal Crafts in church. Actually, Dallas Daniel, the owner of Plantation Building Supply, introduced me to Alan. And I mean, the rest is history from there. That was the morphus of me in the roofing trade. I was not a roofer getting into the roofing business. I was a business person applying my principles to the roofing trade.
Yeah, I'm sure it was much needed.
Well, it was learning, being in that organization, which Metalcraft's a wonderful organization, but being in that organization for 4 years really taught. I got an MBA in small business. And as you know, it's not always the X's and the O's and the execution of it. It's the people. Mm-hmm. And so I learned a lot of how to deal with people.
Yeah. So going back to before you moved up to Augusta. So what is that like? Where around in Savannah did you grow up?
Windsor Forest.
Okay.
Windsor Forest was much different back then. I mean, it was kind of the flight out of downtown Savannah. I mean,
Mhm.
Broughton Street was desolated. It was nothing down there. Windsor Forest was a great neighborhood. We had a swim club there. We did a year at Windsor Forest Elementary School. When my mother moved back, her and my father divorced, and they had kept a house in Windsor Forest,
Mhm.
and so that gave her a place to come home to. And my grandparents lived here, and so my mom came back. There were 4 children. My oldest brother was 12 years older, so he was already in college. So we came back to Savannah, and my mom pretty much raised me, my brother, and my sister. And that
What'd your mom do?
she was a hospital administrative assistant,
Okay.
and I think, if I'm not right, I think she made about $110 a week,
Right.
and with a little bit of help from my grandparents, we made it work somehow, some way. A lot of hamburger helper.
Yeah. What did your dad do?
Dad was kinda out of the picture. He was always an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
He built a hotel up in Augusta at the time when they did finally divorce. He, I'll just he was an only child. He wasn't the family dad,
Mhm.
but he taught me a lot of other good things or whatever. So, when we moved back to Savannah, I went about 3 years without even having communication with my father. And, he did come back into my life, thank goodness. And, so mom remarried and we moved back up to Augusta and, had a stepfather that wasn't really engaged in my life. So I was kind of a street kid.
Yeah. So do you think that kind of played a role into you just because you seem like the type where you're going to do it your way, right? We're going to figure it out. No, you're not. I can be a little bit like stubborn and hard headed, but I've watched you where I worked for you, and I watched the way that you navigate people and problems and issues, and you have a way of just figuring out your own path and your own way of doing things.
God gave me a gift of, being able to see things before they happen.
Hmm.
And so always kind of not got an idea of the direction I want it to go in a solution. But until I get both sides of the story and until I get consensus, I don't try to solve the problem until I listen a lot to both sides of the story. So I think I do have a gift of problem solving, whether it's a bad roof job you may have done somebody or a situation with a supplier or whatever it may be. I think I have an ability to kind of put myself in the other person's shoes, and that's helped me navigate through a lot of controversy.
Yeah, I can see that. There was so you being my mentor, right?
Mhm.
Last night I sat down and I kind of like wrote out a list, right? Like, all right, I want to bring up this, I want to bring up that. And I was going through it and it really kind of spiked some memories that I haven't thought of. And there was one time when there was some issues with residential roofing is I don't blame you for staying away from it. It
I
can be
I'll enlighten you on that.
demanding.
Yeah.
But there were some things going on, and I remember you called me into your office, and it was like the first time you and because I worked, more for Mark
Mhm.
and Mitch, and
Right.
you and I didn't interact a whole lot, especially in the beginning. And you'd call me into the office, and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm in trouble. This is not good." And you just set me down in the chair like I was anybody else, and had a conversation, and I was like, "Okay," and then you're like, "All right, well, here's the problem. Here's the solution. Just do it." I'm like, "All right, well, that makes perfect sense."
You know, whenever you're dealing with whether it's an employee or vendor or customer, you need to be present. And I think it's very important that you're present with somebody that I've been told this over time. It's like you look them in the eye. They're the most important thing that's going on right now. They're in front of you right now. They're the most important thing. And I think that comes across well for me to be present with somebody, to listen to them, because whatever the problem was, God knows it could have been a number of different things in residential roofing.
Yeah.
Whatever the problem was, it was very relevant to you.
Mhm.
And sometimes you can't see the forest for the tree right in front of you.
Right. So who would you say were some of the biggest influential people, in your life growing up at that time?
It's interesting. I mean, I look back at my life at different stages of your life. When I was in high school, it was a high school principal.
Mhm.
Um, I got I got caught in high school with a green leafy substance,
Mhm.
and, it was typical automatic expulsion from school, and he saw something in me and took a chance, actually helped me find a job and really kinda turned my life around, so that man, there's a second chance, right?
Yeah.
In college, it was our faculty advisor for our fraternity. He was in the business school, and he kinda gave me some direction to go into the business school, and he and I developed quite a relationship. Um, when I got out of school, I kinda went I didn't have an active father figure in my life, so I didn't have anyone, and again, I told you I was a street kid. I was the guy that hung out at the neighbor's house hoping I'd get a free meal, you know? Um, but when I got out of school, my wife, man, she's always been my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader, and the person that always gives me the benefit of the doubt, so she's been really my strength. I mean, and then the other one was probably really Alan Lancaster. I mean, he's the first person that I worked for that taught me a relentless work ethic. I mean, he was the first one in, the last one to leave, accountability, responsibility. I mean, he took responsibility to account whether it was his fault or not, and, he really taught me some really core business values.
Yeah. What would you say your friends or your acquaintances in school, how would they have described you? So what I'm trying to understand, right? So I see you as John Reynolds, the finished product,
Right.
right? So I'm trying to grasp, you're coming from living in Windsor Forest, you're like lower middle class. Mom is
Mhm.
going through probably one of the hardest things that she's gone through in her life, moving back to Savannah, trying to navigate work, raising kids by herself. And so what year was that? That was
That was in, 1970, let's see, 1973.
yeah. So being a single mom with 3 kids in the '70s was totally different than being a single mom today.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of assistance.
Right. Wasn't much help. And then just the way the community looked at that as well, and how maybe you and your siblings and your mom were probably viewed. So my parents got divorced, but that was in the '90s, and even back then, I was one of the kids with the divorced parents. It wasn't even as popular then as it is now. So I'm thinking back to the '70s and what that was like and what kind of impact that had. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what you were like at that point in your life
Ye
before you were refined.
So, I I look at it from a few different perspectives. I had a little bit of Eddie Haskell in me, meaning I knew how to charm the moms and the dads,
Mhm.
but yet I was very mischief. Fortunate I didn't get caught at a lot of things I did, thank goodness. Um, Learned from a lot of the mistakes, but probably people would probably say as I was coming up was I was a I had I I had a good looks about me. I wasn't real well kept because we didn't really have the means to do that, but I was a good-looking kid that got the benefit of the doubt and took advantage of every opportunity that came my way.
I
Whether
like
it
that.
was getting invited to a Georgia Bulldogs game. Yeah, I found my way in circumstances looking back on it now saying, "Golly, how did I get there?" And so I think I'm the ultimate optimist.
Yeah. So you kinda created this person who you wanted to be, and you've spent your life becoming
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 that
that
person,
person.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It almost seems like it's hard for you to kinda even look back at,
It's
some of that.
well, when I look back at my life, wow, this is great. I look back at my life, it's like, I wasn't supposed to be here.
Mhm.
I wasn't supposed to be sitting right here. I mean, it definitely was, God's intervention. I mean, he had a hand on me the whole time, and I give my wife all that credit. I mean, she was the founder of my faith.
Mhm.
She helped me find Jesus Christ, and I converted to Catholicism. I was raised in a Lutheran church with very little uh, in religious influence in my life. Had some from Savannah Christian. We had some Bible study classes, but really my wife helped explore that faith. And once I started kind of turning it over to him, and I can't control everything. People look at me like, "Hey, I'm a control freak." I'm really not. It's interesting that perception because I can change my opinion pretty quickly if it means building consensus.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
if it
I don't
makes
feel like I'm
sense.
always right, but my wife probably wouldn't say that.
Right. Um, I'll be honest, man. It's having sitting down and having this conversation with you, man, is just uh, I'm enjoying listening to it. But more than that, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up, man, but the expressions on your face is just like I can just see those moments, and it reminds me of my own personal moments, like hearing you talk, because I was really a lot the same way. Was I was always in trouble, but I was always able to get out of it. And I feel like that is one of the things that has helped me the most. Um, in business and in life is developing the ability to solve the problems even if I created them. Um,
There was and I've watched you in your business. Hopefully, you learned some of these from me. I really studied leadership. When I was building my business, I wish I could say I had it all planned out and I knew exactly how it was going to end. I didn't. I mean, it was just it was hit and miss. Hit and miss. You're you're not a failure. We're failing every day, right? But you're not a failure unless you give up. So I knew I wasn't a failure. I mean, I said this when I started my business. It was interesting. My wife and I had had a miscarriage. We got married when we were 26. We miscarried when I was 28. We decided we are going to have a family. Still hadn't really landed my career yet. Before I'd gone to work at Metal Crafts. Um, we got pregnant, miscarried, and then we went 4 years without getting pregnant again, and we didn't understand. And I never will forget my wife telling me that she wanted to divorce me so I could go procreate. Those challenges were like unbelievable, and I had no idea. I had no idea she was feeling the way she was feeling. No, no. I mean, I was like, "Hey, if we don't have kids, part of God's plan, we don't have kids, but she was really, really focused on it. So she gets pregnant. We're building our house that we lived in for 24 years. We were living in Richmond Hill at the time. So we're building our first house. I was the contractor. My dad was kind of helping me start and then he left. So I didn't know anything about building a house. So all of a sudden I'm the general contractor of my home. So I build my house. Uh, the company she worked for, you've probably heard of the Jepson Museum of Art. Well, she worked for Bob Jepson in the mergers and acquisitions. They got bought out, so she lost her job. I lost her job. She very blessed. I mean, she got a nice severance package and everything. We get pregnant. I quit my job and we started RPI all in the same year. And we built our first house. So failure just wasn't an option. I mean, I didn't have a backstop. It was late at night, estimating on the table and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't know anything any different other than, hey, failure's not an option. I gotta keep going.
yeah,
And that really kind of drove me. I mean, it took me down some hard lanes. It took me down some hard lessons. I, I, I certainly would have done a few things differently, but all of that's what made me what I am today.
yeah. Like what?
Um, just I tell you, when you start looking at the business or whatever, there were many times in the organization that I was slow to hire, slow to fire.
Mhm,
And I kept some toxic people around too long
mhm.
that I didn't really take into consideration or enough of how toxic they were to the other people around them. So while I often compared RPI to the island of misfit toys and Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the
Yeah,
island of misfit toys, we were always an island of misfit toys, but some people I just couldn't fix. They were broken. They were
mhm.
broken, and I seem to attract that. I mean, I look back now at God's plan, and whether it was an administrative staff, I always seem to get a girl that recently went through a divorce, or like yourself, a guy that was,
Yeah,
coming out of addiction, or, I got these people in my life, and I realized I was like, God didn't make me a roofer. He's put me here to help these people with their struggles. So I think all my struggles helped me be a voice to people that were struggling at whatever it was in their life.
yeah, yeah. So that season in my life, I was 12 when I started drinking. My mom was a really bad
That's
alcoholic.
incredible. I mean, 12 years old. That's just hard to even
Way too young.
comprehend, man.
It is, yeah. And I have, we have our oldest son is 19, and then one about to be 17, 16, 12, and 5. When I look at, it's hard for me to, because like none of my kids really drink. I mean, they don't drink or anything, at least not that I know of, and I think of like even my 16 or 17-year-old party, and I'm like, oh, there's no way. But I was 12. But my mom was a bad alcoholic. She always struggled with alcohol. And for her, it was if I was drinking too, then she didn't have to feel bad, right? Because I was excited to drink, and then it's like, well, we can
So
drink together. Yeah.
she was accepting that you were drinking. That's
Right.
unbelievable.
Yeah. But she didn't have to experience guilt, right? We would go have fun together. She moved out to Tybee Island, and we would go, like body surf the hurricane waves at 2 o'clock. We
Right.
just did the craziest stuff, man. But I loved it, I thought it was great.
Sure.
But so I was coming out of that season, and I rode by, and you've always had that we're hiring sign.
Oh, yeah.
Out
Oh,
front.
yeah.
And I would ride by it, and I had worked for another roofing company in town, and it was just not a good experience. It was very much take advantage of insurance as much as possible, right? And that's really kind of what residential roofing has ultimately become.
Sure.
Is if there's not insurance money, most of your roofing sales guys don't know how to bid a roof. They only know how to look at an insurance scope and go from there. But
Well, that retail sales is a lot different than storm chasing,
Mhm.
right? I mean, but anyway, go ahead.
it's tough for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So you attracted that. I mean, I walked in and I was like, hey, you guys have a sign out front that says hiring. And I think Mitch Malpus was walking by, and they're like, Mitch, there's somebody looking for a job. And Mitch took me upstairs, and he was like, all right, well, so I had
Well-
that 06 F-150, and the wheels are about to fall off of it. And
I remember too well. I don't think you were so broke you couldn't pay attention.
yeah.
But I do remember you kind of caught us at a tough time too, because I started in the commercial business, so right away we had bonding. We kind of had a professional playing field to compete on, right? Well, residential is for every Ridgeway Roofing that are committed to employees, there's 24 Chucks in a truck, right?
Mhm.
That are just brokering the business.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring
Labor
a
brokers.
yeah. I wanted to bring that commercial mindset to the residential marketplace, and we were piddling in it a little bit, and then Hurricane Matthew hit, and I think right after Hurricane Matthew, I think is when you came on board, and you had some storm experience. You kind of knew how that game was played, but we were so uncommitted to the residential marketplace because I got excited about $200,000 jobs. I mean, I got excited about making the plan and how are we going to safely execute or whatever. And the residential was just so fast, man. It was moving. I mean, and we never really embraced that lead generation. It's just such a different model than commercial,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to blend. I have found this out since I tried that, and we failed. I mean, we eventually gave up it took us probably 5 or 6 years, but we eventually pulled the plug on the residential roofing model because we just never could. They were 90% of our problems and 10% of our revenue.
Yeah. There's not much.
You almost got to be focused to it 100%, right? And
Mhm.
I look at you, and I have a lot of appreciation. I mean, it's a great business model, and I will tell you, if you ever do get to the point that your business transacts, the successful residential model with multiple locations, it's coin operated, right? I mean, we do this to produce the leads come in, we have closing percentages, you have all your KPIs, you have all your data that you're tracking and everything. That business is like, I wouldn't say it's recession proof, but it has a much higher multiplier of value.
Mhm.
If you can make, let's just say you make $1 million a year of net profit in the residential marketplace, that multiplier may be times 10. I mean, it may be a $10 million business. Whereas in the commercial is a lot more drawn out. It's a lot different. It's a different sales cycle. I mean, the sales cycle is sometimes 12, 18 months on the sales cycle.
Right.
Residential is just quick. And so
it
you
is.
got caught up in
and you
that.
get to build the relationships. the relationships are different, right? Because you're, on the commercial side, they're not spending their money.
Correct.
They're spending someone else's money, right? So there's the relationship's totally different. But with a homeowner, some of the people that I deal with have never written a check as big as I'm asking them, right? Like no one has ever asked them for that much money before. And so it's very emotional, very stressful, and especially in the Georgia market, the profitability is so low. I mean, we
Well,
really have to do in order for us to be like profitable. We need to put on 2 roofs, tear off and put back 2 roofs every day, and it's
you
hard
know,
to do.
when I was doing that, I was the president of the Roofing and Sheet Metal Association of Georgia back in, I guess it was mid 2012 or 13. I can't remember exactly the date was, but I was very instrumental in a licensing push that we had for the state of Georgia. Every state around us has a licensing program except Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida. Well, only thing you gotta have in Georgia to be a roofing contractor is a $200 local business license, right? And you're a
Mhm.
roofer. So I never will forget, carrying that up to Atlanta and meeting with, at the time, Brian Kemp was Secretary of State. This was before he became governor. And I sat down with Brian Kemp, and Brian was like, "Hey, John," and we had a relationship, and he's like, "Well, John, why are you trying to do this?" And I was like, "Well, Brian, I need something to validate the roofing trade." You know, every other state I've always been licensed in Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, because we cross the state line. So I've always carried a license. I said, Georgia's the only place where, you can go do a $1 million roof job and there's really no criteria. You don't
Mhm.
have to have a license. You don't have any professional
Or
expertise.
insurance or anything
And I
else.
will forget, Brian looked at me and said, "Well, John, that would be great, but we don't have any way to police it." I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "No, licensing goes into the general fund, and I think he said something like, I have 4,800 beauticians that I have to, you know, police their licenses, and we can't do it. So you're not going to get it. I am not going to." And sure enough, we pushed it through the House. It got killed in the Senate, and to this day, Georgia still does not have licensing for roofing contractors.
Mm. I didn't realize you had done that much in in trying to get that passed.
Yes,
It would be incredible. It would change the way that business is done in Georgia. And really, this podcast is sort of it's a small business, local community type deal. And there's so many people in the community that especially, we had the Matthew and then the hailstorm. The hailstorm was a big part of it because hail brings people from all over.
correct.
And so many jobs that we've had to go back and fix that. I mean,
Oh, I bet.
it's terrible, when you see it. And again, you're going back to people writing checks they've never had to write before. To write a $15,000 check that didn't get you, but
Well, not only that, though, back, I don't know if you found this, but expectations of people. A lot of people have never been around a construction site.
Mhm.
They don't truly understand construction. And I mean, it's like the challenges you have with employees, showing up. I mean, distribution, getting materials there, whether they just think everything's going to be perfect, right? And
Mhm.
no job is perfect. I mean,
Mm-mm.
you're going to have challenges on a job. I mean, whether it's you found rotten wood or you broke somebody's Sega palm or I mean, but
Right.
nothing's big that we can't fix, right? Well, then you get that customer that no matter what you do, it's not good enough for them.
Mhm.
Those and they're 1 or 2 out of 100, right?
But
I
they
mean,
stand out.
oh my gosh. It's like, how do I get away from this, man?
Yeah.
Just please let me go. Let me
Right.
go.
There's one in particular, and she may not even want us to mention this. Do you remember Brooke? There was a a lady that we did a roof for, and it wasn't even anything RPI did wrong per se. It was just nothing would go right. And you stepped up, and you were the one. I told you I'd worked for other roofing contractors prior, and I worked for a couple after after leaving RPI, and it just would not go right. But even though like you didn't want anything to do with residential, there was what $2,500 or something maybe RPI got out of the deal. But you took the time and you went back and you made it right. Like I think
Oh, I
we had to
remember
like
Brooke.
there was a bunch that had to be done there. There was a lot.
And if I remember right, I think she had recently gone through a divorce or
Yeah,
something.
I think
I mean, she was
her
just in a
husband was
bad,
deployed or was about to be divorced.
she was in a bad
It was
spot,
yeah,
just
it
personally
was
in a bad spot.
right.
And yeah, that one does stand out. But there were quite a few, things you touch. Like we did one time. I mean, it was somebody had one of these screen porches on the back of their house. This was up in Effingham, and I don't know. Somebody may have stepped in and dented his little 29 gauge metal panel or whatever.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, man! I thought I'd never get. I mean, I think we ended up putting a whole new, 24 gauge steel metal roof on. We
Yeah.
spent $10,000 to make that problem go
Right.
away. But I mean,
Yeah.
as I built my business, and I probably got taken advantage of a little bit in the residential, but there was when I was at Georgia Southern, I was there from 1984 to 1988, and that was the start of the football program. And a guy came there, and I didn't mention him earlier, but he was probably I didn't play football, but he was probably the biggest influence in my life. And it's a guy by the name of Erk Russell. Erk Russell was a defensive coordinator coach at Georgia, and then he came and started the program at Georgia Southern. And he had one rule for the team. Tracy Ham will tell this story sometime, and his one rule was do right.
Mhm.
And so that became a core value of my business. It's just like put yourself in that person's shoes, have some empathy, and resolve the problem. I mean, you quit returning the call or you don't pay attention to them or whatever. As hard as it is, at the end of the day, do the right thing. Do what you would do at your mama's house.
Right.
And if you have that mentality or whatever, you'll get through it. And you're going to be taken advantage of. Mac, I'm sure you got many stories where you're
Oh,
taken
yeah.
advantage of.
It's definitely happened.
But at the end of the day, there's one person that's looking at us, right, and
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, man, this guy's trying." And that mentality, I think, it helped me be successful today because do right it's the bottom core value of RPI. I mean, we have a little card for all of our employees of our core. It has our mission, our vision, our mission, our what we're unique about, and then our 7 core values. And do right is probably the most important one.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it does. I mean, I've definitely been in some situations, even when it wasn't 100% not my fault, not my responsibility, is just handle it. Just do it. I mean, like the guys would call me like, look, it's this happened, that happened. Just just fix it. Don't offer resistance, right? Because the moment you start resisting, and the moment a homeowner catches on, like, oh man, this is because it's expected, right? I mean, I feel as a not as a contractor, but as a homeowner, um, I would say the percentage of contractors that I have hired that I have been happy with is probably 2%. I mean, there's not been very many people that I've hired where
Right.
when they finish, I'm like, wow, that was great. It's usually I hire a contractor, and then you've got to hire another contractor to fix the
Mhm.
stuff the other and people have that expectation. So the moment they sense, I see how this is going to go, right? The moment that happens, man, you just turned a molehill into a mountain instantly. So yeah, doing that, having that mentality of just do right.
Do right, right. I
Yeah,
mean,
fix it.
we've learned that in the commercial trade. We went from being defensive to being offensive, meaning looking for opportunities.
Mhm.
Before we were kind of, well, they're not ready for us here. They're not ready for us here. They're not ready for us here. Now we have a mentality of, well, you're not ready, but here's a change order. We can do this. We can do this. We can do this. And so we became a very valuable part of the construction team on new construction, which has led to a lot of our success in the Savannah and Augusta markets. We really, really got really good at helping the general contractor manage the jobs because we had an appreciation for it.
Mhm.
When you got somebody that's like, I'm sure you've had, whether it's one of your subtrades or whether it's one of your employees, that guy that's just like, Mac, I got this. Hey, I got this. I mean, that's the guy that you're like, yeah, man. I mean, he's willing to take a problem and make it go away.
Yeah, and solve it.
Between the Highs podcast is produced inside Story Oak Studios. StoryOakStudios.com.